we on? Are we? Is it, what time is it? Is it 7:30 yet?
Not quite.
Yeah, 7:28. So 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes.
All right.
So we will
Oh,
start.
we got a couple minutes. So go on out to the lobby.
Yeah.
This one's got to get
Yeah, you can move your chairs, hopefully, so everybody can see. Audrey, have you got a chair?
I'm
there?
waiting for the rest. I got a chair.
Okay.
Can you see?
Yeah.
Who else?
Here's my chair.
Lee's missing. Yeah, we'll start here in a minute or two. I've got actually, there's a couple of these PowerPoints that are similar, but this one I'm going to have to kind of manipulate things. But a large part of what I want to tell you is based on the overpopulation or the increasing population of the planet and how it's affecting things like the gravitational pull of the moon on the earth, which is affecting volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis. And if you need a restroom, Audrey, is upstairs.
Okay.
Just go upstairs, top of the stairs. So we're trying to get organized here, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And they've muted themselves until the question and answer time, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're just waiting for Audrey and then we'll get started.
Yeah.
But anyway, the gist of it was that I didn't know what I was going to talk about. And as soon as I turned the television on, there was this news of shooting in Arlington, Texas, where I have a friend who's a Claregate student, lives there. Extraordinary man. Anyway, so I said, well, there you go. It's the overpopulation of the planet is part of the deep esoteric secret behind people shooting one another, behind road rage, is overpopulation of the planet. It's having an effect on it's pressure. It's increasing a pressure on the collective consciousness of mankind. And if you're a Jungian student, then you would know about those things. So you would be able to make some sense out of what I just said. But it's having many negative repercussions, this whole thing of the overpopulation. There, Audrey's back. So yeah, we can get started. This isn't the exact correct PowerPoint for tonight's lecture, so I'm going to have to massage it a little bit as we go along. I've written just a couple of notes of things that I wanted to bring up because they're relevant and they're in the news and people are wondering about them. We're not here to quote ad nausea the writings of Blavatsky and Bailey and Leadbeater and Steiner and others. I love those teachings. I've read the books throughout my life. I'm a fan of all of those authors. But we're now in the new age, entering the new age, and it requires new perspectives and new teachings. And I came into this planet to be a part of a group who are giving out new teachings. And so we're going to have some new teachings or new perspectives tonight on things that are relevant to our day and age in which we're living. And certainly overpopulation of the planet is one of those considerations. We do not know, although it may be true, of a time in the history of the world when there have been this many people living on the planet Earth. It's creating an effect on our environment and on our lives, and it is causing some havoc in the world by virtue of the fact that the increased population of human beings on the planet, we all produce an effluent of emotional energy. And that energy goes someplace. It goes out in space. And one of the things that's happening, we talked a little bit about it several weeks back when I was talking about colonizing the moon. And one of the problems with the moon sustaining life is that it has no astral body, where the earth has an astral body. It has an etheric body, it has a mental body. The moon, through a cosmic accident, we're told in the esoteric writings, the surface of the moon was blown away, and the life forms that were beginning to materialize in the astral world, in the astral planes, were also destroyed, and powerful beings that were ensouling the moon were transferred to the earth. These are the esoteric teachings. Sanat Kumara, Lord of the world, was a being who it now ensouls our planet, but it was at one time a part of the moon chain. And so the moon was also closer. We had talked about that several weeks ago. The moon was acting as a shield during this time of cosmic bombardment where meteorites were everywhere. And it hovered over the earth because it was near the earth. It was so close, as you've heard me say before, it's worth repeating, that the moon could be seen from horizon to horizon. It was that close. It moves away at about 1.5 inches a year. Doesn't sound like much, but over a period of 2 billion years, it now finds itself at about 200 and some odd thousand miles from the earth and is continuing to move away. So the overpopulation of the earth, or the increased, probably is a better term to use, the increased population of the planet is helping to create an astral body for the moon, because the effluent that all human beings give off, you're screaming and yelling at a football game, whether you're at home watching it on television or not, or whether you're in the stadium, you're producing an effluent of emotional energy, whether you're swearing and yelling at your politicians on the news, football games. Anyway, we all produce an effluent of emotional energy, which is astral. Astral, emotional means the same thing. So, in so doing, we're now, the astral body of the earth is touching the moon, and it's beginning to affect the astral body of the moon. But the moon is also affecting the earth through the tides, through increased earthquake activity, tsunami, volcanic activity. We're seeing an increase in that. And it's just really within the last 12 years or so that the Earth's astral body is touching the moon, and there has been an increase in this seismic activity. So that's an important issue. We've talked about it in the past. There's a graph in here that explains it. We also have another graph over there. Some of you can see it from here, where it explains the 7 planes and how the increased population has exerted a pressure on the wheel of rebirth. We're calling it the wheel of rebirth. The cycle or time between death and rebirth is speeding up. And so people are where it used to take 10,000 years between lives, and then 1,000 years, and we'll explain it with future graphs here. There's the wheel of rebirth, symbolically. It's on one of Baker's books on reincarnation. It's speeding up, and the time between death and rebirth is being shortened. Some scientists, some doctors, esoteric people among them, say that they believe that there are some souls that are incarnating into the world within a matter of just a few days
Wonderful.
of dying. And they're coming in with memories of past lives. Even I myself, as a little boy, I could remember dying in World War II when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I had memories. I didn't know what reincarnation was, but I knew that I'd lived before and that now I was in another body, and I saw myself dying, charging up a hill, probably somewhere in northern Italy. But regardless, I had memories of having been killed in World War II, and then I was reborn a few years after the war ended. We have lots of stories like this nowadays of people who have memories of having been in World War II, but they have memories of many lives, of lives in ancient Rome, lives in Atlantis, or Egypt, or China, or South America, or wherever. Memory of past lives is not a new thing, and so we need to be mindful of that. This original PowerPoint was done in 2012, so it's 9 years old, but it's relevant for us today to consider the populations of the planets. And you can see here that China, India, and the whole Asian subcontinent has a massive amount of people living in just those continents, in Africa as well. And over here in America, not quite so much, but South America's this gradual increase. Europe's declining a little bit, but still increasing. The majority, of course, is over here in the subcontinent of India itself, and China, with over 1 billion people in each country, China and India. I think they're similar, 1 point, whatever it is, billion people. When I was a little boy, I remember being in the 2nd grade, and we were discussing, the teacher was discussing or explaining to us the population of America, which was 120 million people at that time. It's now 330 million people, and going up for all kinds of reasons. This will give you an idea of the rapid increase in population growth of the planet from ancient times, back in what we call the old Stone Age period, up to the new Stone Age period, and then the beginning of the Bronze Age. We see slight increase, not much, too much, 1000 AD, so 1,000 years ago. There's 1000 BC, but then this decline by the Black Death, the bubonic plague, and then an incredible increase in the last 1,000 years, mostly because of penicillin, antibiotics. Was common. My mother had a sister who died of what they used to call blood poisoning. Nobody dies of blood poisoning, at least in America, but it was a common thing. And I can remember, I'm old enough now to remember hearing people talk about it. People died because there was no antibiotics. I had a doctor friend, Doc Salin. He was lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana when I was down there. And I knew him very well. He and my sister were great friends. And he was the 2nd doctor in America to use penicillin for a woman who was dying from some massive infection. And he had to get approval from the President of the United States, who was Franklin Roosevelt at that time. And he was only the 2nd doctor that ever used it, and saved her life. So many lives have been saved and improved through the use of antibiotics. and as well as vaccinations of different type, polio, the problem of tuberculosis was a huge thing. Like I said, I grew up in Northeast Indiana, and there was a huge tuberculosis clinic. In fact, my sister-in-law had worked at it for a while. It was called Irene Byron. Irene Byron was a nurse. She was like a Florence Nightingale type who helped people who suffered from tuberculosis, which was epidemic at that time. I even had a grandmother who died from TB, quite common. But there were cures that were discovered, and of course it still exists, especially in third world countries. Even the bubonic plague, the Black Death, it still exists. There was cases of it when I was in Vietnam as a young guy, and there was leprosy, things that we don't exist here. But the increases in medical treatment has caused the population of the planet to explode. And we see evidence of it here in this graph. So the concern of many esoteric people is that they say, I don't know, I've got mixed feelings about it, but they say the world can sustain about 10 billion population. When it gets to 10 billion, it's said natural cataclysmic events will take place that will cause mass suffering and destruction to the human race. We'll see. It's not too far into the future. Some people here are young enough that they'll see 2050 easily, and we should be at about 10 billion in population at that time. Each soul enters the world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of its past lives. Its place in this world is determined by past virtues and shortcomings. So we are the makers and the creators largely of our fate. And it's an important thing to remember as we tread this esoteric path. There is no death, only change of state. Birth and rebirth are endless until karma is satisfied, and then reincarnation ceases. This is Baker's book called The Wheel of Rebirth. I talked about it earlier, speeding up. As the population increases, it's producing an effluent that is shortening the time between death and rebirth. And there's a reason for that. And the reason we'll hopefully get to here. Magically, there are 63 billion monads or souls divine who are using the earth chain of evolution as a vehicle of their expression. 63,000 million or 63 billion monads cycling through life after life. And as the population increases and there are more monads or souls divine in physical bodies, it means that there are less waiting to incarnate, and therefore the time between death and rebirth is speeding up. All the time it's speeding up. This is an interesting graph because it shows the structure of the heart muscles, the fibers of the heart muscle are exactly reproduced in the Anu. There is a continuum which links all living things together so that the smallest cell does not pulsate without its effects being felt in the furthest reaches of the solar system. So we're seeing that there is some magical correlation between the reincarnating we all have as an instrument of our soul a reincarnating permanent atom, and it carries with it mental, astral, physical memory, and it reincarnates periodically. And we're determining here tonight that that rebirth process is speeding up. The control of heredity is actually through the reincarnating permanent atom, and it is affecting what we call genes and chromosomes are affected by the vibration and the memory of the reincarnating permanent atom. Very important tool to remember. The 7 subplanes of the physical are the electron, neutrino, subatomic, ionic, gas, liquid, and solid. The physical plane, we say, is solid, but it is composed of all of these things as well. The etherico-physical world, we call the etheric, the anima mundi, is the occult term or the esoteric term, the anima mundi. The Indians, American Indians, talk about the anima mundi. I think it was Black Elk who said that man did not weave the web of life. He is but a strand within it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. And he's talking about this etheric matrix out of which our world is composed. Here we are. The 7 globes that the Hopi Indians talked about, and they described them through different colors of mud. I can remember being in college, and I did a print of this that showed 7 globes, and we are here at the halfway point in the life cycle of the 4th globe, and we're already, Blavatsky says, beginning to dematerialize. The earth is becoming less physical and more etheric. One of the things that's happening also is that the veils, only recently are the veils thinning between the physical and etheric worlds. I had a friend of mine that was Baker's assistant for many, many years, and we were talking about it just maybe 2 months ago. And we were discussing the phenomena of the thinning of the veils between the physical world and the etheric world. And I said, I have an example. Oh, good. What is it? He said, I said, my brother died 2 years ago. And the other day I was in a kind of a trance state. I could smell my brother. I could actually smell my brother who had died, killed himself, took his life 2 years ago. And it was almost exactly 2 years ago when it would have been the 2nd anniversary, when I had this experience of my brother. I also had a very unusual thing happen. I'm going to have Bonnie Turner. She's one of the Clairgate students who does my PowerPoints. I'm going to have her put this some pictures in I have of flowers that are not perennial flowers. They're petunias. And my brother used to bring petunias to my sister every year. And for the last 2 years, these petunias sprang up in a cluster that is about the 1/4 of the size of this room. A cluster of petunias of every color and description that you can imagine. And she's built kind of a shrine there with a statue of St. Francis of Assisi in this clump of petunias that is just the most extraordinary thing that I've seen in a long time. And it's proof to me of the thinning of the veils between the invisible worlds and the physical world, and that my brother may have had a hand from the invisible side into the physical world. And it's very uplifting for my sister. My brother and my oldest sister were very, very close in age. and we're best of friends, which you can only hope for. But anyway, the veils are thinning and people are reporting experiences of things just like I described, of smelling their deceased relatives or hearing. I've heard my daughter speak to me on several occasions. She died at a young age, and whenever I hear her voice, it's, of course, is uplifting for me, as you might imagine. Reincarnation is a reality, and you'll never be able to make sense out of the incongruities and the injustices of life until you understand that reincarnation is a fundamental principle of life. And as well as the rays, we've talked about the rays in the past, and we will again, even more so in the future, talk about the rays and the role that they play, and some new teachings on the rays, like physical body types. What is a fifth ray physical body? Show me a picture of a person with a second ray physical body, or a seventh ray or sixth ray physical body. And so we'll be doing some of that in the future, but we're showing the soul's journey, and we talked about it earlier, and how it's actually, because of this increase in population, the whole thing is speeding up. Honora, a family, I just had a friend in England who died, and he was the father of this very unique family in England, very esoteric people. Were friends of mine, close to all of them. The father has died, and so now it's like a new rebirthing has to take place for the family, because one of its members of this nuclear family is no longer a part of it. But it's opened a door of opportunities, not only for the person who died, is now in the astral world or higher planes, but the family itself is having to adjust to the loss of their loved one. And we all have to do that, because people are constantly dying and being reborn. And so we're constantly adjusting our lives, and it can be through the trauma of the death experience. For the living, it can be a new beginning. And I always tell people that it's a new beginning when one of its members passes. My daughter used to see from the earliest times that I can remember, she would, and I have a picture she drew as a little girl of she said an angel, there's an angel outside my window, Daddy. I can see an angel. And her horoscope showed the overshadowing of a Nirmanakaya. And the image here representing my daughter, and this really Catholic, Christian-like image of some angelic being was paid visitations to my daughter. But so too it happens at death, when the dying are able to see relatives. I remember I had an aunt that died, and she was telling her sister, my other aunt, the oldest of the two of them, that, why, I saw Dad, my grandpa Zimmerman. And my grandpa Zimmerman, he would always wear, when he dressed up, he had a whole closet full of these gray suits with gray hats that he would wear. And she said he was standing at the foot of the bed, and he had his gray suit on and gray hat. And of course, she was seeing into the etheric or astral, at least, world, and saw Grandpa Zimmerman there at the foot of the bed. And of course, my aunt, the older sister, she was telling that to, couldn't comprehend really what she was talking about. She was truly a fundamentalist Christian in all aspects. But these things are not uncommon for us to have these kinds of experiences. They're known. I'll say that. It's not that they're uncommon. They're uncommon. They're known. They're known to be a part of the birthing and dying experience. One of the interesting topics of the time that is relevant to the overpopulation of the planet is the problem of confused gender identity. And the reason for the confused gender identity is in the fact that the wheel of rebirth, once again, is speeded up. And if you've had 20 or 30 lives in a female body and you've suddenly been thrust into the earth plane in a male body, you will have an adjustment to make. And I can remember being with some powerful mystics in one of these very spiritual periods in my development, and the man who was super psychic, extraordinary individual, said we're going to have a visitor here. And he wasn't even his house. We were in another person's house. He was from South Africa, and we were in Indiana, outside of Chicago, at a lady's house. And he spoke to me and said, now there's going to be a person here today who's a man who's very effeminate. And so don't think anything unusual about it. It's just the way that things are right now. And of course, he did knock at the door, and there was this man came with his mother. It's quite elderly, very effeminate man. And so we see cases of this. There's a tremendous number of people, homosexual types, who are interested in the esoteric because they're seeking answers for why they are the way they are. And this is a large part of the whole thing. A boy wants to be a girl, it says, desires to grow up to be a woman, has a marked interest in female activities, including playing with dolls and playing the roles of girls or women, has an intense interest in cosmetics, jewelry, and girls' clothes, and enjoys dressing up in girls' apparel. Favorite friends are girls, and on rare occasions he may cross-dress and actually consider himself to be a girl. I had a friend who was a music producer in Nashville, and he was, through business connections, he was a friend of Diana Ross. And Diana Ross was complaining to this friend of mine that Michael Jackson would come over to his house, to her house, and he would sit in her makeup room for hours, and he would be putting on Diana Ross's makeup. But you would expect that if you believe in the whole idea of confused gender identity and the problem being a product of a wheel of rebirth that is speeding up dramatically. Girls who express a wish to be a boy whose preferred peer group is male, and when playing make-believe games, they prefer male roles over female roles. So we all know somebody, or maybe multiple people, who fall into that category. There is an explanation. The explanation is esoteric, and it's what I just told you. The rise of androgyny in popular culture has also been on the increase in the 21st century in fashion and all areas of pop culture. We had a man from India who came to Spigno, Italy one year for a summer school program, and he was non-sexual androgynous type
What does that mean?
human being. He had no sexual inclination either way.
No gender.
Yeah.
How that can be possible?
Well, he had gender, but he didn't, it wasn't activated, so to say. Anyway, so I can remember one of my friends, Joe, was questioning him about it. And he was completely indifferent about any kind of sexual activity or inclination. So they're beginning to emerge in the world too. And it's again related to overpopulation, and it's related to this speeding of the wheels speeding up. In Japan, the Japanese government advises schools on responding to the needs of students with gender identity disorder. Now, this PowerPoint was put together 12 years ago. No, 9 years ago, sorry. 9 years ago. And it's obviously more relevant today than it was 9 years ago. And if the Japanese can see it, and it's interesting too, because that's pretty much a country of pure race. The Japanese people are a remnant of the 6th and 7th sub-root races of the sub-races of the Atlantean root race. And the Chinese are the same way. They're almost exclusively, there's no inbreeding is what I'm trying to say. If you're a mixed race person in Japan, you're really looked down upon. I think they call them nisis, as I remember. And if you were a nisi girl, the only thing you could be in Tokyo or in Japan was a prostitute. That was it. So it has its problems, but at least they have identified it and are aware of it and are dealing with it in Japan, a 4th root race nation, which I find interesting. Gender roles, esoteric comment, does the influence of the previous lives in female bodies affect the psychological behavior of being suddenly thrust into the male bodies? Being part of the 5th root race, we must anticipate that the densest point of concretion has been passed, and that is the ascending arc of consciousness and behavior. Heterosexuality is, in any case, naturally on the wane. Lowered sperm counts in the general population may indicate this. Mankind moves once more up the ascending arc towards duality of sexual expression and more ultimately hermaphroditism, where sexual impulses no longer dominate and the mental framework becomes filled out. One of my subjects that intrigues me is this whole issue of hermaphroditism. I've known of several hermaphrodites in my life who had both male and female genitalia. And the one who was living as a girl said that the doctors had told her that she was actually capable of impregnating herself. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because 2 billion years ago, this was the norm. That we carried with us both sexes. These are the occult teachings. Read volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine, Anthropogenesis by Madame Blavatsky. And Blavatsky talks about this very thing, about how the human form evolved out of a mental and then etheric and then an astral and into a concretized physical body. In 1 million years, hermaphroditism will begin to be the norm, but we're seeing inklings of it. We see inklings of all of the past different physical types from gigantism to dwarfism, midget people. We had a tribe of Indians. I used to go there. It was a mystical place south of Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's a state park. The Piqua Indians were a unique tribe of American Indians who were 7.5 and 8 feet tall. They can dig up their graves. They've done it. They had they used mounds, mound builder Indian types, but they were many of these throughout America. But the Piqua were a unique tribe of people because they were so tall. I actually went to school with a beautiful young woman who was a Piqua, part Piqua Indian. She died recently, but she was almost 7 feet tall. I think she was 6'7" or 6'8". That's a tall woman by any measure. But this was the norm and even taller among the Piqua Indians. And of course, we immediately go back to thinking about the Lemurians and how tall the Lemurian races were, many of them. We still see evidence of that in some of the African tribes, the Watusis and others, and yet we see the more the demure and the smaller type in the African pygmies. So you have an entire span of people from 3-4 feet tall up to beyond 7 feet tall. Just in Africa itself, which is a Lemurian continent. So we should expect that. I think that's the end of the lecture, but there are some things that I wanted to bring up that are relevant to the time that we're living in, and you can't help but watch the news and see a lot of these things and question them. One of the things that has been brought to my attention has been the problem of oxymoronic behavior. And an oxymoron is something that is but isn't. Jumbo shrimp is an oxymoron. How can shrimp be small and jumbo be big and say, give me some jumbo shrimp? See, so there are a lot of these oxymorons, but yet we see it in people's behavior, that there's oxymoronic behavior, which is almost becoming an epidemic. And I see it most easily in our politicians. One of the new mental illnesses I wrote, if you saw my posting on Facebook for tonight's lecture, I don't remember now the exact wording, but it was the increased population of the planet and also new forms or types of mental illness in the 21st century. Excuse me. I can remember 40 years ago meeting Dr. Baker, and he was talking to a large group of people about anorexia nervosa, which at that time was a relatively new disease, where the usually young women were starving themselves to look beautiful. So they could never really get thin enough. And the problem was an issue that many women have about their bodies. Their bodies are not perfect. Plastic surgeons are getting rich performing various surgeries that alter the appearance of primarily women, but men do it too in increasing numbers. And the computer, the advent of the computer, and Facebook and Twitter and all the avenues of expression through a computer are causing an increase in body shaming, body consciousness, being aware of defects in the physical form. We talked about anorexia nervosa a little bit, but this is connected to that in the fact that the young women primarily are being most adversely affected. I gave a talk one time on the fifth root race, and talked about Marilyn Monroe as an archetypal image of the Aryan or fifth root race type. And so many women aspire to that. It's a dangerous thing, and a lot of it is to be blamed on Hollywood. We did talk about confused gender identity, which will continue to be a problem into the future. What time do you have, Julie?
It's 8:13.
8:13.
Mhm.
Okay, so I guess I'm open to questions. If anybody in the room here has questions that you'd like to ask, I'll try to answer them. I don't guarantee I can. And then we'll let the people who've attended the Zoom meeting come in with some questions too. Do you have to unmute that?
No, they can unmute themselves, but I do have a question. I think
Yeah.
before anybody else, well, I wanted to ask. So why do you think, why do you feel like there is more all this and identity, gender identity issues right now? Because it seems like a lot of people now, they're gay or,
Yeah.
like I don't even know what they all call, but something. And which is okay with me. I don't really,
We're not passing judgment on it.
yeah, exactly. So I'm fine one way or another, but it seems there's
Could
more.
be us in our next incarnation.
Yeah, it's just more and more, like it seems like almost every family has one person almost like in the family. It's like.
Well, for the very reasons that we discussed earlier, the population is increasing.
Okay.
If there are 63 billion monads seeking expression, it means that on this great wheel here, if we can put this up here. I hope this will stay. I don't know if it will or not. Can you get that on the screen there, honey?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, close enough. But this is the physical plane here. This is the astral, mental, buddhic, atmic, monadic, and logoic planes. Most human beings, when they die, they never really get much past the higher mental planes in what we call Devachan as the mental planes. Most people will pass into the astral, into the monastic or mental planes, and then return to earth. But this wheel of rebirth that's kind of shown here, this thing is speeding up.
But why is that speed?
Because the increased population is putting people in physical bodies. There are more people in physical bodies than any time that we know of in the history of the world. And so it means that as more people come in, there's a pressure that's exerted in the invisible worlds, and that pressure is causing the wheel of rebirth to speed up. So, as I said earlier, and it answers your question perfectly. If you had 20 or 30 lives as a woman, and your permanent atom, the Anu, it had memory, the reincarnating permanent atom has memory of those lives, and suddenly you're thrust into the body of a man, you're going to have an adjustment period to go through. And it could take several lifetimes for that to happen. We've all known masculine women and effeminate men. It's just part of the world nowadays. It's becoming more and more common, and that's the reason is that there are more people. There's a greater pressure exerted on the wheel of rebirth, and they're coming in larger numbers faster than ever before. Plus, there were civilizations, where in ancient Rome and other civilizations where the homosexual tendency or bisexuality was accepted much more than it is probably even nowadays. So that's the answer. There is an answer, and that's what it is. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Audrey.
Okay, so you said the veil is thinning.
It is.
Okay, so this has to do with people who are very staunch, like, this is what I believe, there's God, there's no thing as, aliens, there's no, they're strong held convictions.
Right.
With the veil thinning, will people be more awake? It doesn't matter what side you're on, will they become more aware of what is going on?
Some will. Yes. Yeah, some will. People are beginning to have experiences in increased numbers.
Like paranormal.
Yeah, paranormal experiences. And they write books about it. There's hundreds of books written about it. There's hundreds of books written about people who, little boy, could remember the number of his plane in World War II, his whatever it was, P-38 airplane he was flying in. And he remembered the names of his mates, his friends that were part of his air crew. And he made his father, he was relentless. And finally his father couldn't take it anymore. Said, okay, well, we're going to find these guys. And they found him. And he remembered. And he remembered his name, what his name was. And there's a book written about it. It's an extraordinary book. But there'll be more books like that written. I have memories of past lives in England 500 and 1,000 years ago. I have memories of being in the body of an American Indian several lifetimes as an American Indian. The most recent, though, for me were a life that I had during the time of Shakespeare, and a connection, a karmic link that I had to the true author of the Shakespearean plays and sonnets. So they're out there. People are having these things. Some of it's due to the thinning of the veils. Some of it's due to just the memory of an old soul. An old soul will be more prone to have memory than what a young soul might have. Any other question? Yeah, Don, and then Tracy.
Okay.
Don, go ahead.
Okay, you didn't explain much about the rays tonight, but
Yeah.
each person holds some aspect of a ray.
Yeah, multiple rays.
But now in the reincarnation, can you, multiple rays,
Mhm.
can you come back as another ray? Or
Yeah, of
do you
course.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
rays do have some.
Yeah,
memory.
they do change. Your monad, they say there are 30 billion monads on the third ray, and 30 billion monads on the second ray, and about 3 billion on the first ray monads. But your rays can change over vast periods of time. Your personality ray can change from incarnation to incarnation, depending upon what the soul requires. See?
So it's your soul.
And your physical body, the ray of your physical body can change. I have a third ray physical body. And I might incarnate in a seventh ray physical body. Who knows? But see what I mean? Your mental body can change. Your astral ray type can change.
Okay. But we have an awareness of all that chart
Mhm.
of the different rays and what their aspects are.
When psychology becomes an exact science, what they will teach will be ray psychology. It's about another 100 years from now. In about 100 years, the universities will teach ray esoteric, what we call esoteric or ray psychology. It's forecast by the masters. It's the way it'll be. It'll be an exact science. And when a child goes into first grade, they'll look at his horoscope or her horoscope, and they'll begin to chart the direction based on the soul's purpose of what that child is supposed to do in this incarnation. The rays of the child in the early years are usually 6-ray astral body, 4th ray mind, because they're so closely linked to the mother and the mother's aura, even though the mother may or may not have those distinct rays. The child, based on love ray system, rays 2, 4, and 6, will feel the love of the mother, and it will have a 4th ray mind and a 6-ray astral body until it matures and grows, and some never change, but many do. I hope that made sense to everybody. Okay, is there anybody on the
Tracy.
Zoom? Oh, Tracy, sorry. Tracy, go ahead.
I'm gonna go back to reincarnation again.
Yeah,
I don't know, are you familiar with Dolores Cannon? She was a woman that did hypnotherapy on probably,
I've heard of the name, but I don't really know.
well, part of her, she did a lot of past life regression because
Yeah.
people would have
Mhm.
things that, you know, they would be ill or something.
Mhm.
And she would link it to a past life.
Yeah,
and
sure.
that. One of the things that she found, she wrote, I think, a couple of books. That I'm thinking of right now are the Convoluted Universe books, where she did the histories or what she went through with these people in regressions, and several of the cases that she came across were people that were reincarnated here on this earth, but they also had lives on other planets,
Mhm.
being
Mhm.
incarnated in other lives on other planets.
Mhm.
I guess my question is, first of all, we're not always, and I kind of get that feeling that we're not always reincarnating on this planet Earth.
Mhm.
When we reincarnate, I'm asking as a question, would we reincarnate wherever the soul feels is best for us? Or are we so linked to this planet
It's a good question.
that we reincarnate here over and
Yeah.
over?
The majority rule is that you will incarnate on the earth chain of evolution. Rare souls do incarnate on other planets. Probably very advanced people souls would enter another planetary system. Life permeates the entire universe. The Earth, it's said, is an average planet in an average solar system. So it tells you from that statement that there are planets and evolutions higher than ours, and there are those that are lower than ours. And so we're somewhere in the middle of this tremendous, unimaginable process called life. Okay, anybody on Zoom?
Yeah, I think, let me see.
Is there-
Yeah, Angel wants to share something. Angel, please unmute yourself.
Hi, David. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Great topic, and so apropos to what's happening right now on Earth. I wanted to share with you another great resource on the topic is from Bailey, a compilation on sex, and they talk about the problem of sex. And part of it to your point, has to do with the outgoing 6th ray and the incoming 7th ray. That has a little to do with it. But it also talks about, this book was published in 1980. And it says the majority of the children who were born now in the 80s have come in accidentally, or they were not wanted. And this is directly correlating and talking about the problem of sex, the energy, the misuse of the energy of sex. And this relates to the whole sexual addiction issue, sex and love addiction. And when you spoke about the anorexia, sex and love addiction has 3 phases: sex addiction, love addiction, and then anorexia. A lot of people, it's emotional anorexia, where they literally want to avoid relationships. But some of the people that have that anorexia result to, because the self-hatred is so great, they result to cutting themselves, or to your point, going into plastic surgeries and whatnot, because they're never enough. They're never enough. And what DK says about self-hatred, which is the core of all addictions, you know, we're just medicating, whether it's alcohol or it's drugs or it's sex, medicating. And you know, I know you know about this. So you're medicating against the self-hatred. DK talks about nobody really 100% overcomes self-hatred until the 3rd initiation. So there's something that we all have, I guess, a little bit of it, the feelings of not being enough, these kinds of things. But what's interesting is DK in this book, he's talking about how this idea of sex addiction has caused so many souls to incarnate before they were planned to, because of all the sex that's going on, that's in his view is not aligned with divine law and that sort of thing. And he goes on to say that the day of ordained and desired births is drawing nearer, when it becomes possible that more rapid incarnation of disciples and initiates will be coming in. So it started, but what it's about is the sexual relation is to be in a space where the two come together to procreate, to have a healthy and sane body available for these incarnating souls. So this has kind of not been how or why people have been having births. A lot of them are based on heredity, passing on.
What you're doing is you're giving me a lecture.
Oh, I didn't mean to. I just was sharing.
Yeah, they used to do that to Baker all the time. Just ask me a question, because there are other people who want to ask questions.
Well, I'm sorry, I did not realize that. I was just sharing because you inspired me so much with all these different topics of what's going on today in the world with all this human trafficking, and the world is going to find out just how prevalent all this is. And the teaching that is going on in the schools right now with children, it's been going on for several decades, about the gender roles and the confusing of the children. So everything you talked about is happening right now. So I just wanted to thank you. And I didn't realize I wasn't trying to.
No, that's fine. But yeah. Anybody have a question on Zoom that would like to ask a question and it's relevant to
it's 8:31, so if we don't have too much time, but yeah. Okay. No questions, I think.
No questions? It's a lot of information there, I know that.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.